Hi, today we're going to talk about fibroids and perimenopausal bleeding. Hi, I'm Dr. Shelley Meyer. Welcome to my channel and welcome back. If you're coming back, thanks so much for being here. I talk a lot about hormone balance, gut health, your metabolic health, a lot of different topics, and I've been focusing on women's health and perimenopause in particular. Those ages that lead up to menopause can start anywhere between the late 30s to late 40s, so there's quite a range. So I've been focusing on that a lot lately because it's very important and not talked about nearly enough in offices, medical offices. I say that because I am in my office today, and it is talked about a lot here, but it's not talked about a lot at a lot of other doctors' offices. So I am a functional medicine doctor, a family doctor, and a registered dietitian, and I work with women every day in this office on hormone balance. So I talk a lot about these stages. I've got a lot of videos in this series on perimenopause, so check those out if you haven't yet and you're curious. But today we're going to focus on fibroids and perimenopausal bleeding. So what are fibroids? There are tissue benign masses, so not cancerous. There's some debate on whether sometimes they can evolve into that, and they do need to be monitored, but they are non-cancerous when they are fibroids, and they happen in the uterus, and they can cause, or they can be small, centimeters, up to, grapefruit sized or bigger. Typically, most women don't let them get to that phase without getting them checked out, but I have seen cases of that in my practice. So fibroids should be monitored. Like I said, they can cause abnormal vaginal bleeding. So you may have what feels like very heavy periods. You may have spotting in between your periods. And particularly when you have that estrogen dominant phase that I talk about a lot, and check out my video on perimenopause phases or stages. But when you have that estrogen dominant phase, that early stage, the first few years of perimenopause, like I said, they can be a wide variety of ages where these can start happening. But when you have that stage of estrogen dominance, you can obviously have more estrogen than you do progesterone. There's that imbalance in the what you want to be a perfect balance between the two, or kind of a more agreeable balance between the two. So when you have that estrogen being up here and that progesterone being down here, we call that estrogen dominance, and that's part of the first few stages or the first few years of perimenopause. So when you do have that, you have more surging of that estrogen, and you can have fibroid growth. So if you already knew you had fibroids, those can get worse, and that means the irregular bleeding that you already may experience from estrogen dominance without fibroids can get way worse during perimenopause. So perimenopause can be a trigger for worsening fibroid growth and fibroid development. So then you may have the bleeding, the perimenopausal bleeding being worse, either in between periods, or like spotting is worse, or the periods are a lot heavier. You can also have abdominal pain, feeling bloated, lower back pain as those grow or are stimulated, sometimes rectal pain I've seen. And then frequent urination can also come from fibroids too. They can also cause pain during intercourse. So if you're having pain during sex, could be a fibroid, especially if you're in those ages that I was talking about, or experiencing some of those other symptoms, and particularly if you already knew you had fibroids. So another reason for fibroid growth could be genetics. So you could, if you knew your mom or sisters have fibroids and had difficult perimenopausal bleeding, that could be part of it too. So if you combine the genetics with the perimenopause time frame, that can make it a lot worse. Some women will go to their OB-GYNs or their family practice doctors or internal medicine doctors and get IUDs for treating fibroids, and that's perfectly acceptable if you want to use that as a form of treatment. I'm going to go through and talk about some of the ways you can deal with this, but that's something that some women do, but it does have progestin, and that's the way it works, the Mirena IUD at least. And so I'm not a big fan of fake progesterone, but I think in some women that have really, really bad periods, especially in the perimenopausal time frame, and the fibroids are really bad, and that's the only thing maybe for them that can help control it, then that might be an option for you. Just trying to make that time frame of use as short as you possibly can, and not keeping them an IUD in any longer than you possibly need to. Also working on better hormone balance. So I work on that a lot in my functional medicine practice. I will look at your hormones, look at the balance between the two, look what stage you're in, and try to work with you from there. So as you've probably seen in my other videos, I do have a lot of videos on estrogen dominance. You know, one thing I like is a blend called FemGuard Balance, a natural support blend. Also in the estrogen dominant phase, I like to use the herb dim quite a bit. That can be super helpful. So those are kind of two of my go-tos. Calcium D-glucarate is another great way to get rid of excess estrogen, especially if you have found through testing or working with your doctor that you're not detoxifying well. Calcium D-glucarate can be very, very helpful. And then speaking of detoxifying, and calcium D-glucarate, you may want to look at your microbiome or your estrobolome, we can call it, because optimizing that digestive function, that getting rid of excess estrogen, which you have a lot of during the first few stages of perimenopause, can really, really help decrease the fibroid growth. So getting rid of that excess toxic estrogen that you may have if your microbiome is a bit screwed up can be a way. And the one marker I look for to see if you need calcium D-glucarate or if it would be helpful to you is called beta-glucuronidase. And I do test that through the microbiome tests I use, like the GI map, and then the GI standard by US Biotech is a new one I've been using also. If you want to check out any of those tests, you can check out my lab shop. In the description, there's a link to check out those tests that I use. So if you do use one of those, look for beta-glucuronidase, and if that's high, that's a sign that you could benefit from calcium D-glucarate. And then you also want to try to find ways to hopefully tone down that estrogen that uterine activity with the heavy bleeding that goes along with perimenopause. So on top of the herbs I've talked about in my perimenopause supplement video I did, also sometimes when women are bleeding quite a bit, we'll use shepherd's purse, which is an herb, or yarrow, YARROW. And there's a recipe for a tea that I'll put as in my options for my free PDF. If you just want to join my email list and get that free PDF, there's a herbal blend tea that I have a recipe for that I think could be very helpful if you have really heavy bleeding. But another blend you could get if you don't want to make a tea, Slow Flow. Sorry, it took me a minute there. Slow Flow by Vitex. That has those nutrients in there, and it's super helpful in that heavy bleeding time due to fibroids from perimenopause, or fibroids and perimenopausal bleeding combined together. And then you also probably want to look at inflammation. You can look at simple inflammation markers with your doctor through something called HSCRP, C-reactive protein in your blood. You can also just work on inflammation through omega-3s. Turmeric are ways to work on inflammation, but definitely putting the whole piece, all the pieces together through some of those herbs I talked about, and then the microbiome testing if you can afford it, and working on inflammation through not only supplements like omega-3s and turmeric, but also through your diet and lifestyle. So check out my estrogen dominance diet, and I'm going to have a new video on that, but I also have some in my playlist that I have in the description. And look at anti-inflammatory foods, so lots of brightly colored fruits and vegetables, very low sugar diet, lower carb diet, higher fiber are all very helpful. Not low carb, but good healthy carbs and low sugar. It is very important for hormone balance and being anti-inflammatory. Omega-3s, as far as food intake goes, like in fish and chia and walnuts and flax, if you can tolerate those gut-wise, those are very helpful for inflammation too. So toning down that inflammation can help your fibroids and your perimenopausal bleeding be a lot better. And then another thing that I haven't focused on in recent videos that I did in my older videos on estrogen dominance is looking at xenoestrogens in your life. So bring in plants that help to clean your air, using air purifiers, looking for cosmetics, things that you put on your face that don't have any kind of xenoestrogens in them. I'll have a link in the description of I'll have some links of some healthy cosmetics that I like, and then I have some videos on that completely. or covering that completely. But looking at things that don't have parabens or phthalates in them is super important for lowering your xenoestrogens and purifying your air. And plants can be great for that. So check out or consider all these things if you're having issues with fibroids and perimenopausal bleeding. Throw any comments in the comments on this video. I can't give you individual medical advice, but I can offer some basic guidance on what I do with my patients. And thanks so much for watching, and thanks for being here. If you like the channel, please please subscribe and give this video a like and share it out so that the channel can continue to grow. And then check out my other videos if you need more guidance on this topic, and I'll see you next week.